Hello, everybody, and welcome back to day 3 of the Amonkhet Set review from Gathering Information.
We already on day 3?
Yep. Well,
oh my gosh.
I mean, we're on day 1.5 because we've been ready for this forever. But we are bringing you day 3 of our set review, and this is an interesting one. If you check nothing else from our set review, you should check out this, because this is the day that we are bringing you all of the pesky instant speed effects. We did a full set review on the creatures and non-creature spells and lands over the last couple of days, but this is something a little different. We're focusing in on combat, or what your opponent could be doing during your turn. These are the things that are always stumbling blocks for new players or players for a new set. What could they have? Well, we're going to tell you exactly what they could have. And we're starting at the lowest mana cost in Wooburg order and going to the highest mana cost of instant speed effects. So by the end of this, you should know if your opponent is holding up 4 white.
What they could possibly have.
Yep.
This is a great idea, because I know personally how many times in a pre-release you sit there and you think, I don't know the set. I don't know if I can attack into that because I don't know what they could possibly have. So this is really cool.
And it's really not as much as you might think. The possibilities are not endless. There are a very few things that really matter in combat or on your turn that your opponent could have. So let's jump into white. Starting at 1 white, there are 2 spells. We've got Jeru's Resolve and Time to Reflect. Now, both of these are a little bit situational, but both of them have more to do with combat than anything else. I'm just going to read them. Jeru's Resolve for a single white instant at common. Untap target creature, prevent all damage that would be dealt to it this turn. And basically, the only way that this could really mess with you is if you're attacking in when their creatures are tapped and they suddenly untap a blocker and prevent damage that would be dealt to it. You know, maybe they double block with something else, and suddenly you're sitting there and your creature's going to die, and you weren't expecting it. Well, if they've got 1 white up, now you know what to expect. The other Time to Reflect is a single white for an uncommon instant. Exile target creature that blocked or was blocked by a zombie this turn. Now, if your opponent has any zombies, and remember, there are white zombies in this format, and there are multiple colors that can get you those white zombies or those black zombies, this could be a fairly strong option for certain decks. Just be aware, if there are zombies on the other end and they're leaving up that 1 white.
And they seem to make a hanky attack or block with a zombie, or with a zombie involved. This could be a thing that happens.
So I believe that's it for the single white. We're on to 1 and a white. 1 and a white, there are actually 3 things that could really matter in combat. Impeccable Timing, we all know from Kaladesh or Aether Revolt. 1 and a white, instant at common. Impeccable Timing deals 3 damage to target attacking or blocking creature. This is your everyday sort of average white removal spell. It's situational, it deals with combat, it deals with aggression, and it deals 3 damage specifically. Now, a lot of players think that this is a bad spell, or it's too situational to be worth it. In reality, it's alright. You can play one even in a draft deck if you don't have better removal, but in sealed, at your pre-release, people will be running these, and you probably should too, because they're not bad removal, considering that your pool is going to be light, and you're going to want to play the removal that you've got.
And sometimes when you have smaller creatures, as you might in white, it's a good way to get the extra 3 damage, like on a 5/5, to finish it off. So,
or in conjunction with a giant, is it giant crab? Ancient crab in blue. If they're playing white blue, and their ancient crab blocks, suddenly they can deal with something with 4 toughness, and that's most things. So be aware of that. Next we have Mighty Leap, also at 1 and a white. Target creature gets +2/+2 and gains flying until end of turn. Well, if you think the sky is clear and your opponent has 1 and a white up, they may just have a Mighty Leap, and that's going to make their creature big enough to tumble. You know?
Yeah.
Big enough to rumble with your big flyer.
Yeah.
So just be aware. And finally, at 1 and a white at common, we've got In Oketra's Name, another instant. Zombies you control get +2/+1 until end of turn. Other creatures you control get +1/+1. So this is your average anthem. It's a little bit weaker than a normal anthem, but it's instant speed, so it can be used on the defensive. And sometimes giving your whole board +1/+1 can be just enough to make what looks like bad blocks into decent blocks, trading off a board or even winning combat. So if your opponent is playing the defensive or seems to be hiding something, you should definitely keep this in mind, especially if they have a bunch of zombies, because those zombies will suddenly be a lot bigger. Also, if you think you're in a race with your opponent and they have one of these, that might just change the math in a way that is not beneficial to you. These are the things at common and uncommon in white. Moving on to our next card, we've got Prepare. This is a rare, so I've put it separately, but 1 and a white instant. Untap target creature, it gets +2/+2 and gains lifelink until end of turn. This can also really change race math. They might have swung in, and then you think that you're attacking into a clear board. Suddenly their thing is untapped, it's bigger, and they're gaining life. That can be
a
not
giant
good.
pain. Yeah.
So at 1 and a white, these are all the things that you need to be at least aware of. With rares, I wouldn't recommend worrying about them unless you've seen them once from your opponent, or unless you get that 6 soul read. But the commons and uncommons, definitely something to be aware of. On to 2 and a white. Start is the first one. This is another one of those split cards, aftermath cards, but the white is the part that's instant, and it's cast from the hand, so I'm putting it here. At uncommon, create 2 1/1 white warrior creature tokens. Suddenly having 2 more power on the board can be pretty good.
Yep.
They can, again, force inadequate blocks or make blocks that are not to your benefit. If you've got any X ones, these will trade with them. So it can make a big difference.
Well, yeah, suddenly it takes their 3/3 and turns it into a 5/5 and, can win the combat or...
Plus, they might have a couple of bodies left over that they wouldn't normally with a normal combat trick. All right, next up we have another creature. Not a token this time, but one with flash. 2 and a white for Vizier of Deferment. Creature, human cleric. It's a 2/2 with flash at uncommon, so these will be flying around. A flash 2/2 can already do all of the things that those, well, almost all of the things that those 2 1/1s can do, as far as changing combat math. And when Vizier of Deferment enters the battlefield, the casting player may exile target creature if it attacked or blocked this turn, and then return it to the battlefield under its owner's control at the beginning of the next end step. But this can be used to either save one of their creatures that was going to die in a block, or it can be used to exile one of your attackers that was going to get in for damage.
This is a fairly strong trick.
Yeah. It could be used to bounce one of your creatures that's double blocking one of theirs, and suddenly your single remaining blocker is going to die. So this is definitely something to be aware of. At 2 and a white, can be pretty powerful. On to the next instance. These ones are less useful, but they are still instant speed effects, so I put them here. Forsake the Worldly, 2 and a white, instant at common. Exile target artifact or enchantment. The artifact doesn't really matter, but the enchantment might. There are cartouches, there are trials, there are, frankly, quite a few enchantments that you might care about on the battlefield. The one of interest in white is coming up next, which if you bounce at instant speed could be a big problem, or if you destroy it at instant speed could be a big problem. And also there are some enchantments which add bonuses or buff your creatures, so suddenly not having that can really change the math. Renewed Faith, 2 and a white for an instant at uncommon. You gain 6 life, or they can cycle it to gain 2 life. Gaining life is not good, or just gaining life is not good, but some players may want to put this in their deck, and it can change the math.
You can think you're swinging in with your whole board because you have lethal on board, and they suddenly pop this, and you're like, oh, now there's a crackback.
Yeah.
Oops. Yeah.
So, not the best effect, but one to be aware of. Finally, in white, we have Cast Out. This is what I was saying. If somebody forsakes the Worldly on your Cast Out and gets their blocker back, yeah. Anyway, Cast Out is 3 and a white, so if they have 4 mana left up, it has Flash. It's an enchantment, but when it enters the battlefield, exile target non-land permanent an opponent controls until Cast Out leaves the battlefield. This can kill planeswalkers, this can kill attacking creatures, this can kill other enchantments. This can seriously wreck a plan.
This can grab a god that is indestructible. So, yeah.
And one who's swinging in after you've already paid the cost for it. So
yeah, this can ruin your day quite nicely.
It's expensive at 4 mana to leave up for your opponent's turn.
But at later game, when people are routinely leaving up some extra mana because you just don't have anything to cast.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So definitely something to be aware of. Anyway, that's all you have to worry about in white. There are really not that many effects and not that many really strong ones, but now you're aware. On to blue. One thing that we know about blue is it knows how to counter spells.
Oh boy, howdy.
There are a lot of blue counter spells in this set, and these are the cheapest. Essence Scatter, instant, common, counter target creature spell. This can really deal with most threats in a game of Limited, because most threats in Limited are creatures. And then Censor, 1 and a blue, instant at uncommon, counter target spell unless its controller pays 1. If you're worried that they might have a counter spell, you might want to leave that extra 1 mana sitting up just in case.
That's good. I was thinking the same thing.
You don't want to play into a mana or a spell pierce type effect like this. With the Essence Scatter, there's really not much you can do other than maybe play your weaker creature first and see if they counter that. Counter spells are annoying, but knowing when the mana is available and what counter spells there are can really help. There are more counter spells. These are just the cheapest. Also at 1 of the blue, we have Winds of Rebuke. It's an instant at common, and it returns target non-land permanent to its owner's hand. Then each player puts the top 2 cards of his or her library into his or her graveyard. So this is a fairly standard bounce spell. This is another version of blue removal. It's situational. It only lasts for a turn, but it can be pretty annoying if you've got your entire game planned out. Moving on, we have Failure. This is another counterspell type effect, but since it's rare, I've put it by itself. 1 in a blue, instant, return target spell to its owner's hand. What that means is counter a spell and then put that spell back into the caster's hand. They're not as detrimental to your game plan as straight up counter spells, but again, it represents that tempo loss.
Yeah, the other thing is, something like you swing in with all of your creatures and you've got one of those anthems and you go to play your anthem because this is the way that you're going to win your combat, and they bounce it to your hand.
And then make easy blocks.
Yeah. Wipe your board.
Yeah, that can really be painful. Again, this is a rare, so I wouldn't play around it unless you've seen it or if you have some reason to believe it's there. But definitely something to be aware of. Next, we have, oh, look, more counter spells. These are the 3 mana counters at 1 blue blue and 2 in a blue, respectively. If your opponent has 1 blue up in their 3 mana, they're almost as likely to have double blue, so it's hard to tell which of these they might have. And don't be fooled by the red sorcery there. These are both fine blue spells to play in just any blue deck. Cancel 1 blue blue counter target spell. There's not much you can do about that, except try to play out your weaker spells first. And if you're doing that, well, that's also giving your opponent some advantage. With Reduce, 2 in a blue instant at uncommon, counter target spell unless its controller pays 3.
Youch.
I wouldn't play around this either unless you can really afford it, because waiting 3 turns so that your spell can cost 3 more, yes, you're dealing with an entire card of your opponent's, but, well, first, in this instance, you're not dealing with an entire card, but only half of a card. And second, that just gives your opponent the time that they're looking for. But these spells are something to be aware of. Moving on to Gale Strike, 2 in a blue for an uncommon instant. Return target tapped creature to its owner's hand. And draw a card. So this is another bounce effect, but it is instant speed. The creature has to be tapped, but as we know, most attacking creatures have been tapped. So this can be used to get one of your attackers out of the way for a turn, or if they have some way of tapping your thing down, which we might see coming up, this can bounce it. Blue doesn't have what we'd call strong removal, but they do have answers which buy them time, and that's what we're seeing here. Next we have Commit, 3 and a blue for an instant at rare. Put target spell or nodland permanent into its owner's library, second from the top. So again, this is a counter spell and a bounce spell in one card. Putting a card into its owner's library second from the top means they buy even more time. Again, this is a rare, but this can be a seriously annoying effect.
Yeah, that's what I would call blue. Annoying.
Annoying.
Unless you're playing it.
Next we have Decision Paralysis. At 3 and a blue, it's a common instant. Tap up to 2 target creatures. Those creatures don't untap during their controller's next untap step. Remember what I said about them tapping your stuff down? If your opponent casts this on your turn before you attack, then your stuff doesn't untap on your next untap step, and then they can bounce it. That's going to set you back a ways. Really, the only way to deal with these sorts of things are with either protection or a counterspell of your own, but it's definitely something to be aware of. The only other things we have in blue are really quite expensive card draw effects. 3 and a blue, draw 2 cards. If you don't give them any reason to cast their counter spells, they might be happy just drawing cards at the end of your turn. And then they're getting value because they might still have their counter spell. Instant speed card draw isn't something you see all the time, but it does happen sometimes, and it looks like this is the set for it. Finally, at the expensive end, pull from tomorrow, X blue, draw X cards, then discard a card, or Mind, draw 2 cards for 6 mana. Now, Mind you'll see in their graveyard because they can't cast it from any other location, but it's something to be aware of. If they're leaving up 6 mana, they may just be bluffing you so that they can draw their cards. They might not have anything worth casting.
The thing that can happen, though, with the less expensive card draw is if they're instant speed, you think you've got them locked down, it's end of the game, there's nothing they can do. Suddenly they draw 2 cards, especially if they have a fair amount of mana. That may give them that top deck they need.
Might buy into their answers.
Yeah. But, I mean, again, there's not a whole lot you can do about it, but it's good to know.
All right. Moving right along, we're on to black. Supernatural Stamina. At a single black for an uncommon instant. Until end of turn, target creature gets +2/+0 and gains. When this creature dies, return it to the battlefield tapped under its owner's control. This is almost the same as +2 and regenerate.
Yeah, it's kind of a hanky regenerate.
In this case, it's funny. One of the things that new players or players who aren't aware of all of the rules often ask is, so when you regenerate, it dies and then comes back?
Nope.
And you have to explain, no, it doesn't actually die. But in this case, yes, it actually dies.
So if you are using a creature that has an ETB effect, you suddenly will get
You'll get the enter the battlefield.
So this could
or
be...
the death trigger.
Yeah, so this could be slightly better than a regenerate.
It's definitely slightly more interesting.
So, yeah, that's different.
In any event, for a single black, this is basically what you get. And it's a decent combat trick. It's something definitely to be aware of if they've got 1 black up. +2 means that whatever it is big enough to rumble with whatever you might be swinging in with, and regenerate, for all intents and purposes, means that their creature's not going to leave. The only other single black spell is Scarab Feast, and it's really not relevant. Exile up to 3 target cards from a single graveyard. This is instant speed. I'm not sure why.
I think the only thing that this is going to be is if the person who's being targeted by this spell is going to pull something from their graveyard and suddenly,
Yeah, but they get to do it anyway.
Oh, yeah?
Because the trigger's already on... Because Embalm as part of the cost is...
Fair enough.
exiling.
For Embalm, yes.
But it's really just an interesting card, but not relevant to
I don't
combat
think the
limited.
combat math, no.
The one that you really need to worry about is the Supernatural Stamina.
Yeah.
However, up at 2 mana, we've got a couple of interesting effects. Destined, 1 and a black, instant at uncommon. Target creature gets +1/+0 and gains indestructible until end of turn. Indestructible is one of those things where, again, you think that you're going to swing in clear, or you might trade with your enemy, or they might have something that's not quite big enough to kill your thing, but +1/+0 and indestructible, suddenly they have a block. You have a block on your hands, and their creature doesn't die.
Yeah.
At 1 mana more, I'm not sure it's doing any better a job than... I don't remember the name of the spell.
The Supernatural...
Yeah. But it's another option. Shadow of the Grave, again, is not extremely relevant, but it could be. 1 and a black for an instant at rare. Return to your hand all cards in your graveyard that you cycled or discarded this turn. Your opponent could use this to get back some valuable instant that they had cycled or discarded earlier in the same turn. So if they're doing a bunch of cycling on your turn, you might be aware of it. I don't know why they wouldn't just cast the spell to begin with, but
you never know.
This is one of those strange things that might come up once in a while. It's probably not going to, though.
It's really cool art, though.
Yeah. Next, we have Splendid Agony. 2 and a black for an instant at common. If they have 3 mana, they might just have a kill spell. Distribute 2 -1/-1 counters among 1 or 2 target creatures. This could potentially just kill something of yours outright, or, again, it could make for some awkward blocks where you attack in thinking your way is clear, and they block and then shrink your creatures, 2 of them, and win 2 combats that you weren't expecting.
Yep. If you're swinging in for lethal, this can take the fangs out of your lethal.
Absolutely. And then finally, final reward. 4 and a black, instant, exile target creature.
Oh, I like that one.
If they have 5 mana up, they probably have a kill spell. If they don't cast a kill spell, then they probably have nothing. But this is the kill spell to be aware of, especially in limited. It's common. It's very telegraphed at 5 mana. You'll know if they hold up 5 mana on their turn, on your turn. Anyway, on to red. Red, we've got, hey, Magma Spray. It's a shock. Single red for an instant at common. It deals 2 damage to target creature, but if that creature would die this turn, exile it instead. This is going to be highly relevant with all of the graveyard retrieval.
Very much so.
2 damage is about what you get for 1 mana in red.
And it's fine. I mean, it can take down a lot of the zombie things.
And again, it can be added to a combat to kill
very much
one of your big things.
And then exile.
And then exile it. On to 2 mana, there's a couple of things to worry about. Brute Strength, 1 and a red for an instant at common. Target creature gets +3/+1 and gains trample until end of turn. If used on the attacks, this can force through some damage. If used on the blocks, the +1 to toughness means, again, they could win combats that you weren't expecting. And with the +3 to power, they can really win combats that you weren't expecting. Failing that, Fling for 1 and a red, instant, at common. As an additional cost to cast Fling, sacrifice a creature. If they block and their creature is going to die anyway, then they can just sack that creature to deal the damage. Fling deals damage equal to the sacrificed creature's power to target creature or player, so they can put that damage anywhere they want. That can be pretty potent, especially if you aren't expecting it. At 1 and a red, these are the things you need to be aware of. On to 3 mana. Onward! 2 and a red, instant, at uncommon. Target creature gets +X/+O until end of turn, where X is its power. It doesn't really grant double strike, but that's the general effect. It doubles a creature's power, so whatever the most relevant thing is, might be dealing double damage. This doesn't grant trample, and it doesn't grant first strike, so it's not like it's going to save the creature that it's on if it gets into a lethal tumble, but it can be used to take out big things.
It can also be in those instances where you're thinking, well, I'll just block this, this, and this. I'll leave this one up. I can take 2. I'm, at 3. When you could actually block that last creature. So you might be aware that...
You might be taking lethal.
Yeah.
Next, we've got an interesting one. Glorious End. is a mythic, so it probably won't come up that often.
This is the weird one.
2 and a red, end the turn. Nothing really you can do about that. You can counter this spell, so if you're in blue, good luck. But ending the turn means that everything, including combat, immediately halts, and it moves on to the next turn. And at the beginning of your next end step, you lose the game. So if the player who casts this can't kill you during the next turn, or if they don't have a second glorious end, then you're pretty much a shoo-in to win. But this could make the difference in a small percentage of cases. Again, it's a mythic, so I wouldn't worry about it unless you've already seen it used to good effect. And if you have seen it used to good effect, then that's not likely to happen twice. So we'll just move past Glorious End. At 4 mana, Electrify and Pursue Glory are the things to worry about. Electrify is an instant at common. It deals 4 damage to target creature. This will kill most things. 4 damage is a lot, and outside of rare or green, there aren't a lot of things with more than 4 toughness. Pursue Glory, 3 and a red for an instant at common. Attacking creatures get +2/+0 until end of turn. This is the Trumpet Blast. This is the Anthem. This is the thing that's going to deal lethal damage to you in a red deck. This is definitely something to factor in if you're trying to do the math and wondering if you can survive their next attack.
If you're playing against a red deck that seems to have a lot of really small creatures, you can pretty much guarantee they're going to have something like this in the deck.
Last in red, we have Deem Worthy. 4 in a red. This is the final reward of the red deck. An instant at uncommon, Deem Worthy deals 7 damage to target creature. And if they cycle it for 4, they get to do 2 damage to target creature. So cycling is instant speed. You can think of this when they have 4 mana up. It's a 4 mana shock, but at 5 mana it will kill just about anything. Definitely something to be aware of if you see them holding up 5 mana in red. On to green, we've got a couple of things at 1 mana that make for some interesting combat situations. Shed Weakness, green for an instant at common. This is the giant growth of the set, with a twist. Target creature gets +2/+2 until end of turn. You may remove a -1/-1 counter from it.
Ooh, that's well situated in the green-black deck that I think we're seeing on the horizon.
If they have a creature with a -1/-1 counter on it, this is giant growth. If they don't, it's just +2/+2, but that can still be highly relevant, especially at instant speed. Much the same, Hapatra's Mark, single green for an instant at uncommon. Target creature you control gains hexproof until end of turn. Remove all -1/-1 counters from it.
Ouch.
If they have something with 4 -1/-1 counters on it, this can be a big swing. And the hexproof means that whatever you're trying to use to kill that creature isn't going to work. We've seen effects like this before in Ranger's Guile or other cards that I can't think of the name of, but never one that had the potential to grow the creature with such potency. And at single green, these things are going to be very easy to bluff. Next, for a single green, we have the plummet of the set. Stinging Shot is an instant that puts 3 -1/-1 counters on target creature with flying. Now, if you don't have any flyers, you don't need to worry about this.
Nope.
But if you do have flyers, Well, then something to keep in mind. The green deck will be boarding this in against you. And in sealed, they'll probably be playing one main deck.
Yeah, and at common, you're going to see them all over the place.
Yeah, you're going to see them around. Next on to the 2 manas. Haze of Pollen is, well, it's a fog. 1 and a green, instant at common, prevent all combat damage that would be dealt this turn. It has cycling, so it's a little better than just fog, but at 2 mana, I want a little more than a board-wide fog. Some players may play this, though, and again, if you're in a race, this could make the difference. So be aware that it's out there. Dissenter's Deliverance is the other 2 mana green spell that really isn't relevant. It's an instant and it's common, which is why it's put here, but destroying target artifact really doesn't do much in this set. There are very few artifacts and really none that have combat value. The notable exception is whatever they have called Leonin Scimitar, the equipment that has +1/+1. If you have one of those equipment, be aware that your creature might suddenly find themselves without a sword in the middle of combat. Next, we have the powerhouses in green. They're all at 3 mana. 2 and a green, 2 and a green, 2 and a green. Spidery Grasp is an instant at common. Untap target creature. It gets +2/+4 and gains reach until end of turn. This basically adds giant spider to the stats of any creature you happen to have, and also untaps it.
That's big.
That's very big.
+4 to the toughness.
And +2
Yowza.
is enough to the power that it matters.
Yeah.
And it untaps.
And it's at common.
And it grants reach.
Yeah. It's just a really good combat trick.
This is the stopper.
Yeah.
Yeah, very good combat trick.
Yeah, this is the... I don't think so.
Something definitely to keep an eye out for. If untapping one creature isn't good enough for you, Synchronized Strike, 2 and a green, instant at uncommon, untap up to 2 target creatures. They each get +2/+2 until end of turn. Now, this doesn't grant reach, but this has a lot more potential for winning combats. +2/+2 to 2 creatures and untapping them could mean that your opponent could double block your big thing and just kill it without either of their creatures dying. Or maybe they trade one of their creatures, but the other survives. It's something to be aware of. If you've got an unstoppable big thing, this could put a stop to it. The other thing at 2 and a green is a flash creature. Pouncing Cheetah is a creature cat at common, and it's a 3/2. 3/2 is a pretty good surprise blocker. 3 power is enough to really change math, and whether it survives or not, they'll have traded a card for a card, so that should be fine by them. Just something definitely to be aware of. If you feel the board is clear, it might not be. Finally, this is the last one, we have Heaven. X and a green, instant, at rare. Heaven deals X damage to each creature with flying. This is probably not going to see mainboard play, although it might in sealed. But if you have a lot of flyers and you're up against the green deck, you had best hope that they didn't open this in their pool.
Yeah, that's for sure.
Because this is going to wreck some blue-white flyers days.
Yep.
It's situational, so it's only something that you need to worry about if you are in flyers. But
it's good to know.
There you go. And there you have it. There are the instant speed effects for Amonkhet. There are, I should have counted, something like 46 possibilities, but spread out among the 5 colors, that's really only 5 or 6 things to worry about. And when it comes down to mana cost, really only 1, 2, maybe 3 things they could have. If you pay attention and learn these cards in particular, you'll know what to expect in the middle of combat and what your opponent could have when they're acting on your turn. Tomorrow, we will be back for a flavor review, which is going to be fun for me. In the meantime, you can check out our podcast, The Knowledge Pool, for more opinions on the current state of Standard, formats that we enjoy, all sorts of other interesting Magic information. And as soon as we get home from the pre-release this weekend, we'll be posting articles to the new blog, link in the description. Thanks for watching. Come back tomorrow to see the flavor of Amonkhet, and everybody enjoy your pre-releases.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks for watching. Bye.